deliver your dessert. But over here, we're talking about DoorDash in the desert.
What'd you call DoorDash today?
Because what's the feature of DoorDash? What does DoorDash do as a company?
It's a deliver food, right?
They deliver food. So what's the food delivery in the desert?
It's the manna from heaven.
Right to your front door? Yeah, exactly. The manna from heaven.
Oh.
So that was DoorDash before it was cool, before somebody monetized it.
And remember, if you took more than your share, it would rot.
Exactly.
What?
Yep. And then not just the food, but the people who ate the food
Right,
eventually
right.
did as well.
Maybe we should do that today and we have more honest people.
What do you mean? Do what?
You know, like you
Drop
said.
manna from heaven?
No, if you took more than what you needed, you would die, right?
Well, plus,
No, the food would go bad.
Oh.
Yeah.
And
Listen, fire from heaven and all that, like chill out, God's not that angry.
see, if you're
It's just
if you're the pure ones, it'd be right at your door, so I had to go pick it up.
Yep.
God's not that angry. In this parsha, I just read it.
Fine, fine. Sometimes, sometimes you have to
clean.
clean house, but generally speaking. So the Jews had a fantastical time in the desert. Food descending from heaven, available in whatever flavor you wanted, right, Yoey? It could be ice cream flavored man, right? And
They sort of talked about share. Doesn't matter how much somebody ate, somebody ate it all, like they didn't waste it.
they would eat their own entire portion. There was an omer of manna per person. And for decades, that's what the Jews relied on, and they didn't have to pay. It just was delivered to their front doors.
You have to explain to them what an omer is, because
Omer is a certain measurement.
it's what they
The
would
tenth
do
of
when
an
they had-
ephah.
when they would do barley.
Now that's something else.
Yeah, but they would wrap it up and you'd have an omer. That's what an omer would be and be tied up. And that's an omer.
I don't know if they're necessarily identical.
Right,
One's a form of bundles.
right.
Their friends from the PD are checking up on us very nicely. So yes. Ask Steve to pour it for you.
Bring it over here.
So
Can I have that also? So, yeah.
Jews had a and physical abundance, whatever they needed. And we'll see how this connects to us and what this means in terms of our study of Torah and what type of areas of Torah study we should be engaged in. I'll just give you the spoiler version, which is there's bread from the ground and bread from heaven. Both of which obviously come from heaven, right? Everything comes from God. But some is more openly from heaven and some comes through, more natural means. Similarly, in the study of Torah, there's the genre of Torah study that's the bread from heaven, so the bread from earth, so to speak, where it's didactical and practical and back and forth, technical measurements and things like that. And then you have the element of Torah study that's more esoteric and spiritual in nature, and that's what we're going to refer to as the bread from heaven. So the manna, as we learn in the book of Bamidbar in this week's Parsha, was the most constant presence in the desert with the Jewish people. It descended every day, except for Shabbos. They ate it. They lived by it. It was the most essential feature in their daily existence. And there's a lot of talk about what it tasted like, what did it look like. The Torah tells us it was like these round golf balls, essentially. White, round loaves of bread. That's what it was. So
Here it looked like crystal.
Okay,
appearance of crystal.
okay, but it was white, clear, something like that.
Oh, okay.
So little opaque. So
Portlander Sea.
Corlander. So the Jews complained. The Jews complained that they're eating the same food over and over and over again. And so they complained that they wanted meat. And the Torah tells us exactly about the manna. Why don't you start us off over here? Source 1 from the book of Numbers, chapter 11,
The manna
verse
was
7.
the manna was like coriander seed, and its appearance was like the appearance of crystal. The people walked about and gathered it. Then they ground it in a mill and crushed it in a mortar, cooked it in a pot, and made it into cakes. It had a taste like the taste of oil cake.
So like pancakes.
I thought only the Russians had to mill the,
Well, we're just reading the pasuk and seeing this is what the Torah says. It could be this only applies to the Russia.
okay.
Keep going. When the dew.
When the dew descended on the camp at night, the manna would descend upon it.
Okay, so let's see Rabbi Eben Yisrael Steinsaltz's commentary on these verses. So keep reading.
The manna about which they complained was like coriander seed. In its shape and size, it resembled the small round seeds of the coriander plant. However, unlike the brown color of coriander seeds, its appearance was like a white crystal-like substance. The people would go about gathering, they would grind it in a mill or crush it in a mortar, cook it in a pot, and make it into cakes. Its taste was like the taste of rich oil. The manna was not dry, rather it tasted like food infused with oil and moisture.
Oh, delicious. So it's deep fried cakes. You know, they had donuts or donut holes essentially. You know, those little mini
Yeah.
that's kind of what it was. It was very flavorful and enjoyable, except without the fat. You know, it was just all nutrition, no fat. It was fantastic. Now, what did it taste like? Well, we have an idea because it was, you know, oily. But Steve, why don't you read text 2 or source 2 at the bottom?
Look at what God did for the Jewish people in this world. He rained down the manna with all the different tastes. Each Jew tasted whatever they wanted. As the verse says, for 40 years God had been with you. You have lacked nothing. What does lack nothing mean? When one craved a specific food and said, I wish I had a fatty meat to eat, the manna would immediately taste like the fatty meat. Bad for it'll clog your veins.
No, it doesn't say that it had cholesterol. It just said it tasted like fatty meat.
I bet you it did.
Yeah.
Okay, whatever they said, God made it happen.
Okay, that's fantastic. So if you wanted it to taste like ice cream, you're like, oh, I wish I had some ice cream now. And I guess I'm just gonna have to suffice with this, you know, oily bread from heaven. And then it's like, tastes like ice cream. Spinach. Okay, spinach. You know, it's interesting. The Medrash doesn't mention spinach, but listen, you know, we accept you regardless.
My mom said she has to put up with me.
Okay. Not anymore.
No,
Okay. Go. How much effort was needed? Source
Okay, how
3.
much effort? Source 3, Talmud, Yoma 75a. It is written, and when the dew fell upon the camp in the night, the manna fell upon it. Numbers 11:9. And it is written, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day. Exodus 16:4. And it is
So
written,
did it go on the camp or did they have to go out of the camp? Okay, keep reading. Just noting that. And
the
it is
people went
written.
about and gathered it, Numbers 11:8. How can these texts be reconciled?
So basically, the Talmud is analyzing all these different verses that are mentioned in the context of the manna, and the Talmud is picking up on some discrepancies. Did the manna land in the camp? Did they have to walk out and get it? Did they have to like go out on a hike and get it? How do you reconcile all these different expressions that are going on over here? And so this is where what Steve referenced earlier, this famous Talmud comes into play for the righteous.
For the righteous, the manna fell at the opening of their homes. They expended no effort at all. The average people went out of the camp and gathered what fell there. The wicked had to go farther to gather. The manna is called, quote, bread, unquote. Exodus 16:4. Quote, cakes, unquote. Numbers 11.8. And another verse states that it was ground in mills. Numbers 11.8, implying that it was neither bread nor cake. How can these texts be reconciled?
So again, we have three different descriptions of it. Is it a bread? Is it a cake? Is it just flour that you have to start from scratch? Which one is it? The Talmud answers this as well.
It's a kosher. Hostess ding dong.
What?
I said it's a kosher hostess ding dong.
Oh. Yeah.
Nice.
For the righteous, it fell as baked bread. For average people, it fell as unbaked cakes. For the wicked, it came in an unprocessed form, and consequently, they ground it in a mill.
Okay. So basically everybody got the same thing, but they got it a little bit different, a little different packaging, shall we say, or different readiness stages, right? Now, the question is, if you look on our brachas chart over here, what blessings to make on food, right? You'll notice that it says for the bread, he who brings forth bread from the ground, right? Now, which bracha did they make on the manna? So, if you think about it, the hamotzi, I don't know where it is on the chart, but the hamotzi blessing has to be made. What does hamotzi mean? I'm just going to show it to the screen over here. So we have over here, hamotzi lachem min haaretz, right? He who brings bread forth from the ground. Now, our bread comes from the ground, right? Their bread coming from the ground came from heaven. So there's different opinions as far as what actually happened there. The Bnei Yissaschar writes that they ate it without making a blessing beforehand. If you think about it, the obligation to make a blessing before food is a rabbinical obligation. The biblical obligation is to make a blessing after eating food, as it says in Deuteronomy, you shall eat, you shall be satiated, and you shall bless the Lord for the land that he gave you. So the rabbis added to that and said you should make a blessing before you eat as well. But be it as it may, some opinions say they didn't make a blessing on the manna beforehand. In the book Vayitzbor Yosef, another author, he says that since each person could taste the manna as whatever food he wanted, whether it was a piece of meat or ice cream or chicken soup, it couldn't have had a fixed blessing, but everybody made a blessing as the fruit that they tasted it as. So if they thought they were, I wish I was eating a peach, they'd make a bracha bora priya eitz and they'd bite into the manna, which would then miraculously taste like a peach.
If you eat a cracker or a piece of cake, you don't have to say the hamotzi.
No, you say.
You say the mizonot right here.
Huh?
Mizonot.
I don't know.
Of course you do. You can't eat.
Like Pasadena, they weren't washing their hands or saying the hamotzi. And
I don't know what they do in Pasadena.
Someone said if you eat a cracker or a piece of cake, you don't have to say it.
No, because it's mizanot, because
you don't say this, but you say this.
Oh, you still got to say it.
Of course. You can't eat God's food without permission.
Otherwise they'll knock your teeth out.
You might.
They'll knock your teeth out.
Hey, I don't know.
So
I'm still learning.
Good.
So depending on what the food tasted like, remember, you were able to willfully inject your preferred flavor into the manna, and so therefore, whatever you intended, that's what it would taste like, and that would be the bracha you'd recite on that. That's what here in source 4. It's from Rabbi Yosef Chaim of Baghdad. It says, you asked what blessing they made on the manna. Rabbi Menachem Azariah of blessed memory writes that in the future, at the Messianic feast of the Leviathan, they will take out a jar of manna, because remember, Moses had to put away a jar, and eat it, making the blessing, Hamotzi lechem min hashamayim, who brings forth bread from heaven. So basically, I don't know if you've ever heard about the Leviathan and the boar ox, which are two massive animals that will be fed to the entire Jewish people at the arrival and celebration of the Messianic era. And there's going to be a massive showdown. The Leviathan, which is a sea creature, a fish from the sea, a massive fish coming out from the depths of the hiddenness of the ocean, will come in contact with the wild ox, which is an animal representing the animals from dry land. And
Behemoth.
what's that?
Behemoth.
A big animal. An ox.
I thought it said behemoth in there.
I don't know. But Shor Habor is what it's called. And the struggle will end with the Leviathan killing the wild ox with its fins. And so essentially, the sharp fins of the Leviathan, because it has to be a kosher fish, so it has fins and scales. So it's not a whale, it's not an orca, it's not anything like that, but it's something with obviously very, very large scales. And one of those scales will swipe the neck of the Shor Habor, killing it. And
Swipe the neck.
Uh,
It'll shecht it.
exactly, it'll shech the Shor Habor, and at the same time, the horns of the Shor Habor will stab the fish, and it'll die.
So then have a big feast.
And then we'll have a big feast. And so, and then there's also going to be the Yayin HaMeshumer. There's a whole song of it. Yayin HaMeshumer, vel mir trinken, Shor Habor levusen, vel mir essen. Oh, if them Sudan, you ever heard that song?
Yes, it's Yiddish.
Okay. So we're gonna have special preserved wine, wine that was stored away from the 6 days of creation, and it's all gonna be brought out for this grand feast. So, but how do you fit so many people into a ballroom? So there's not gonna be a big enough ballroom for everybody. They're gonna have there you go. You have a UFC fight on the other side.
It should be like, it's like the Holy Temple,
It'll just be open,
Just,
but you need a tent for the shade. So the skin of the Leviathan will be spread out as a massive tent over
Nice.
over everybody.
Be a little fishy, but
So
Sushi.
what bracha are they going to make on the man that they take out at the meal? Hamotzi lechem min hashamayim. Okay. Let's see the story of heavenly bread without taste. The Rebbe.
The Torah refers to the manna as bread from heaven or grain of heaven. As a result, some early halakhic authorities maintain that the blessing recited over the manna was who brings forth bread from heaven. The difference between bread from heaven and bread from the earth is that bread from the earth requires extensive labor before it becomes fit to eat. The entire process of bread making must be carried out, plowing, sowing, and so on. Even after this, ordinary bread still contains waste that the body needs to process. Bread from heaven, by contrast, requires none of these labors, and it contains no waste whatsoever.
So in the entry, there's not a lot of effort, and that's it. It stays in. It becomes part of your blood and your nutrition. So that's why you didn't need a lot of food. Us, we need so much food because most of it comes out the back end. But with the manna, it all stayed in. There was not one bit of waste. All right, Steve.
okay, the heavenly bread didn't only serve food for the righteous, average people in the literal sense, people whose merits and sins were equally balanced, also ate it, and wicked people did too. Even the manna served as food for the wicked, it remained a food without waste. Even after it was eaten, it did not lose its unique quality, and it did not change after being absorbed in their bodies.
So you think that, okay, you know, the tzaddikim, they didn't have to go use the bathroom because, you know, they elevated the manna. But the simple folk or even the evil people, they maybe had a regular process. But the truth of the matter was, the manna retained its pure stature no matter who ate it.
Hmm.
Furthermore,
Okay,
moreover,
that's more do you want it. Not only was the manna unchanged by being eaten by the wicked, but because it retained its elevated nature, even after being absorbed internally, it even refined those who ate it.
that's the ideal. We want the manna to transform the person eating it.
Thus the sages said, the Torah was given to be interpreted not only by those who ate the manna, though through eating the manna,
The Torah was given to be interpreted only by those who ate the manna.
Right.
Yeah.
Through eating the manna, the Jewish people became fit to receive and interpret the Torah. The influence of the manna extended to all 600,000 Jews, for each one received the Torah, and each possessed a share in its plain meaning. Hence, homiletic interpretations and mystical dimension.
Remember, there's the Pardes, the orchard of the Torah. Pardes, how do you say orchard in Hebrew? Pardes, which is an acronym for four words. Pei Reish Dalet Samach stands for Pshat, Remez, Drush, Sod. Pshat is plain meaning, Remez is hints, Drush is homiletic interpretation, and Sod is mystical dimension. So, every Jew who ate the man, the man had a infusion and add additional ability to study Torah properly. It was a special like calcium strengthens the bones,
Yeah.
protein strengthens the muscles, right? Mana strengthens the Torah learning capabilities. That's how it works. So the simple meaning of what went on there was the Jews were in the desert, free from all concerns of earning a livelihood. They didn't have to plow, sow, labor, or do anything to get their food. It all arrived ready-made, DoorDash from heaven, right?
Right.
And so they were able to devote themselves to the study of Torah without any interruption. That's one interpretation. Another interpretation of how the manna helped their study of Torah is that the manna was really the ultimate test of faith. You know, imagine waking up each morning and you have your food delivered, but you go to your pantry and it's completely empty. There's not a morsel of food in your pantry. But you know, you have a DoorDash subscription and every day you get your food delivered for the day. But what if the driver calls in sick? You know, what if the app isn't working? What if, I don't know, the gas station had an issue? What if he got into a car accident? DoorDash is not up. What if the drivers go on strike? Who knows, right? Your credit card didn't go through. I mean, there's a million different reasons why your DoorDash might not show up, right? But yet, over here, the Jews were living off DoorDash. Of course, we're talking about God delivering their food. And their pantries were empty. They had no little, carry-on bag with a little beef jerky or what's that? They have these, like, you always hear advertised on the radio, these 25-year storage foods, like in case of an apocalypse. And
I have one of those.
I'm sure you do. Of course you do. But
the thing is when it gets to 25 years, you got to figure out what you're going to do with it. Are you going to eat it or throw it away?
I don't have that problem. I might have some chickpeas from 2019, but that's about it.
I need to put that in my new house.
Bring it in for added flavor. Okay. So the bottom line is living and relying on the manna was an incredible test of faith. Let's put it in different words. Imagine you didn't get a monthly paycheck, but you got a daily paycheck. You got paid daily. You're a daily worker. And every night you go to sleep and the balance is zero. And you're just hoping and praying that the next day the balance won't go into negative and that you're going to get a refill of funds every single day, and try doing that for 40 years and see if you don't need a psychiatrist after 40 days, right? It's an incredible exercise of faith that the Jews went through and persisted through. And that faith is what made the Jews a fitting vessel to study the Torah. Because at some point you have to accept, I really do trust God. And I trust him fully and wholeheartedly. And if he said, don't save your food to tomorrow, if he said, empty out your bank account at the end of the day, and I'll take care of you tomorrow morning, that's actually what's going to happen. And that complete faith, that recognition that it's not the might of my arms that makes me my strength, but God gives me my strength, that humility is what made the Jewish people a appropriate vessel and receptacle for receiving the Torah and really internalizing it. So that's some of the explanations of how the manna exercise had a spiritual impact on the Jewish people. But the deeper explanation that the Rebbe is giving here is that when a person is nourished by bread from heaven, it's not just physically eating. It's spiritual nourishment that refines the individual. It's food that refines a person's mind, preparing him to understand the Torah with greater depth and insight. And the Rebbe continues, the wicked remained as they were after eating the manna. It did not immediately bring them to repentance. I'm on page 5. For this reason, some of the Jews still had to grind, pound, and cook the manna before eating it. And there were still those who tested me 10 times. Right? God complained to Moses, these guys, they don't give me a break. Tested me these 10 times after eating the manna. But this only means that the manna had not yet completed the process of refining them. Nevertheless, since it was an entirely heavenly substance, it certainly had some refining effect upon them. In the end, when the destined purification would be completed, the manna would have also played a role. So either way you look at it, some people had to put in a little work in order to actually transform themselves and allow the manna to take effect spiritually. Some people, they just got it delivered and the manna had its spiritual effect just by eating it. He had a lot of issues.
Well, they flushed.
Give me a couple of weeks. I have enough trauma from 50 weeks ago. Give me another couple of weeks till we discuss Korach again. All right, page 6. Joe, why don't you start with source 5? How Shabbat connects to the manna.
Shabbat and the portion of the manna, source 5. Sefer Hatim. One who is far away from a Jewish community on Shabbat and does not know which Torah reading is read that week should read the portion of the manna, because it was said on Shabbat.
Right? Because God told Moses, hey, tell the Jews, stop moving. Where are you going? Don't get any food today. You got it yesterday. And unlike the last 6 days, yesterday's food lasted till today.
And it was a double portion.
It was a double portion. So
Does that mean that more came out of heaven on Friday?
Yeah.
Like,
mhm.
so like, I mean, God guesstimated what there was for each person on Sunday through Thursday.
So each of those days it was
Regular.
1 unit per person. And on Friday it was 2 units per person, so that it'll last throughout Shabbos.
What if a person was hungrier than 1 unit?
It sufficed.
It worked.
It worked. Remember, there was no waste. Usually our hunger is somewhat associated with our
Okay,
addictive nature and the dopamine that we get from the good taste of whatever it is. And sometimes we, indulge more than we need for our bare necessity.
right.
But here they had exactly what they needed. All right, let's see what the Rebbe says. Keep going.
Yeah, okay. Read the portion because it said on Shabbat. The Rebbe, at first glance, there are many sections of the Torah associated with Shabbat. After all, everyone agrees it's given on Shabbat. If so, one could just as well read the Ten Commandments. Why then is the custom specifically to read the section about the manna?
Right, and there's also like portions in the Torah that like talk about the sacrifices that were brought on Shabbat. There's like the portion of the shipwreck, so many areas where it talks about Shabbat. If you're going to say, well, I don't know what the weekly reading is, let me read something Shabbat related. You have a whole menu to choose from. Why is there this thing that you're supposed to read the portion of the manna? So the Rebbe says as follows: based on the above, that the manna retained its unique greatness even after descending to the very lowest levels, the special connection between the manna and Shabbat becomes clear. Shabbat also shares this unique characteristic. While Shabbat descends into the physical world, it still retains its essential nature and intrinsic holiness. So, how do we see that Shabbat retains its holiness even in this world? So there's a fascinating law. The Mishnah says in Tractate Demai, over here in Source 6, one who purchased produce from someone not trusted to separate tithes and forgot to tithe it themselves may on Shabbat ask the seller and rely on their word. So what happened is a person purchases vegetables from somebody who's not regarded as trustworthy regarding tithes. Normally, in other words, this is, by the way, it's worth noting, if you ever go to Israel and you're shopping in the supermarket, whereas in America, we know to check the wine bottle for an OU, or the apple juice over here also for an OU, right? And the croutons for another kosher symbol. We know that if you're buying produce in Vaughn's or Ralph's, you just buy the produce. You don't need any special certification. The problem is in Israel, produce isn't kosher. You can't buy produce in Israel unless or let me put it this way, it's guilty until proven innocent. Because produce in Israel has to be tithed before it can be sold for a profit. So when you're buying produce from a person or a store or a franchise, doesn't matter where you're buying it from, either you tithe it after you buy it, or you know for a fact that the seller has already tithed. So on a weekday, when you buy produce, you have to separate the required tithes yourself, even if the seller claims that the produce was already tithed, because how do you know to trust the seller that he already tithed? But what happens if the purchase takes place on Shabbat? Now, there's other issues with making purchases on Shabbat, but let's say somebody gives you produce on Shabbat, when you obviously can't.
Gives you, but you're not buying it on Shabbat. There's a difference.
Or let's say if you bought it right before Shabbat, and then Shabbat comes in, and you're like, "Wait a second, I didn't separate the tithes."
So who's separating the tithes, the grower or the person buying it?
Okay. The obligation is upon the fruit, upon the produce. Now, if the seller already tithed, then the buyer doesn't have to tithe. But if you're buying from somebody you don't know, you have to assume, and this is why I said guilty until proven innocent.
Yeah.
Unless you know for a fact that the tithe already took place in the seller's possession, you have to take that responsibility upon yourself as a buyer. But what if you bought it right before Shabbat?
And that's giving it to rabbi, or how do you
Um,
tie that?
I think you have to don't, the truth of the matter is, I don't practice it because I don't live in Israel. But I think,
Rabbi.
I think, listen, I know practical everyday law, and I don't know every detail of everything, but my guess is that either there's different types of tithes. Some you have to give to the poor. Some you have to bring to Jerusalem and eat it within the wall space of the city of Jerusalem. So depending what type of tithe it is, depending what year it is, but the point is, leave aside for a second what you're going to do with the tithe. What about the other 9? Right? You can't, if you bought 10 bell peppers and you tithe, you put one aside. Now you're allowed to eat the 9 peppers. But until you do that, all 10 peppers are not kosher. You can't eat any of them till you officially designate one of them as tithe.
Or maybe you could take the money that's worth and then give it to rabbi.
That is an option in some
Yeah.
places. Yeah. So, but what happens if you face this dilemma and it's on Shabbat? And you're not allowed to separate tithes on Shabbat. So what do? I have 10 peppers. I can't eat any of them because I forgot to tithe before Shabbat. So in that case, the buyer could ask the seller, "Did you tithe?" And if the seller says he tithed, then the buyer could rely on that answer. Why? Because you're kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. You can't fix it yourself, so you rely on the seller. So the Talmud says, "Wait a second, how could this be? If throughout the week we don't trust this seller, why on Shabbat do we suddenly rely on his word? If the guy's a liar and a cheater, he's not a scrupulous religious Jew. Why suddenly on Shabbat are we like, oh yeah, sure, whatever you say goes? Do we trust him or do we not trust him?" So here the Talmud says, they said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that it was permitted in honor of Shabbat. So, in other words, let me translate that in simple terms. If you're not going to eat your 9 peppers on Shabbat, you're going to go hungry on Shabbat. I mean, that's no way to celebrate Shabbat, right? You just bought the peppers or the avocados right before Shabbat, and now you got nothing to eat because you're not sure about its tithing status. So in order to honor Shabbat, they allowed it. So the Talmud says, if so, why ask the seller? Let's just say, oh, whatever, not looking, it's Shabbat. It's more important that I eat something on Shabbat. I'll figure it out later. So Rabbi Bivi said, in the name of Rabbi Yoyanai, the awe of the Shabbat is upon them and they will tell the truth. So in other words, the same Shmo who Sunday to Friday, you don't believe a word he says. And when he says, oh yeah, it's tithed, you say, yeah, right. I don't believe you. I'm going to take my own tithe. That same guy, when you ask him on Shabbat, there's something in him that doesn't let him lie. So to not ask him is not an option. You can't just say, oh, it's Shabbat, I can eat whatever I want. No, you can't. Because how do you know with tithed? But you do need to ask him. Now, during the week, we don't trust this guy. But suddenly on Shabbat, we trust him. Why? Because, I'm not sure if the Rebbe is going to say this, but on Shabbos, every Jew has a neshama yisera, an additional soul. There's an added dimension of spirituality in every Jew on Shabbat. And so that alone doesn't allow the person to lie. This crook, this savvy business person who sold you the peppers and avocados, he simply cannot lie on Shabbat. It's just like that. Let's see how the Rebbe puts it over here.
If you bought all these peppers just before Shabbat, it wasn't Shabbat, it was Friday.
Right, but you didn't take the time to tithe it.
Right.
So it's untithed produce. And you're not allowed to tithe on Shabbat.
So,
Yeah, okay.
Going back to the Mishnah said, you may ask the seller and rely on their word. So in other words, you've discovered the dilemma on Shabbat. Just like any on Shabbat dilemma, right? What happens if you forgot to turn off your bedroom light and you realized after Shabbat began, right? So yeah, you have an issue. Of course, you could have turned it off before Shabbat, but you didn't. And now it's 3 hours into Shabbat, and you want to go to sleep, and the light is on. You need to figure out a solution, right? So over here also, you have food. You're in the middle of Shabbat. You don't know if it was tithed. You can't tithe it yourself. What do you do?
Okay, like here, Rabbi,
Yeah.
we can bring that bottle of scotch in at 6. If Shabbat starts at 6:45,
Right.
you can still open it. Is that
Mhm.
the same thing we're talking about with this tithe?
It's different. Opening a bottle, you can open a bottle. It's unless it has letters that are blocking you from opening it. But generally, you can open a bottle on
But
Shabbat.
Shabbat, right? It doesn't, it's at sundown. So if you come in an hour before, the tithe should be okay.
If you tithed it,
Right.
Yeah, if you.
but if
tithe
you
it,
didn't,
well, then you're not gonna eat any peppers.
well, that's not what the Mishnah says.
Or
That might be what you
coffee.
feel, but Judaism doesn't go by what you feel. It goes by the law, and the law says you ask the seller.
Call them and find out.
Well, there's no
You
call
you
him.
can't call
It's Shabbat.
Shabbat.
You go
No, it's
across.
not. It's at 30 minutes before. It's not Shabbat
him.
yet.
No, on Shabbat, you have to go knock on his door and ask him.
You go across the courtyard in the village and you knock on his door
And
and
after.
yeah,
Before's okay though.
yeah.
This is just like when I was a kid. You'd be asking me the same question.
Okay.
This is funnier than that. You know,
I'm glad you're enjoying the trip down memory lane.
5 years later, it's still the same.
Did you do that?
What?
Knock on the neighbor's door.
No, we'd have the same discussion. It was just
Oh.
65 years ago. You know, we're sitting down and having the same discussion.
Huh.
All right, your turn. Go.
The light of Shabbat penetrates all creation to the point that he complete wicked person is not on Shabbat. Yet this does not mean that on Shabbat the person is suddenly inspired to repent and ceases to be wicked. We are speaking about someone who remains the very same person he was the day before and nevertheless does not lie on Shabbat because the light of Shabbat reaches even the lowest spiritual levels. This is the reason for the law that if one does not know which Torah portion is to be read on Shabbat, the section of the manna should be read. Everything that comes down into the world has its source in the Torah. Therefore, in order to bring the spirit of Shabbat into the world, so that worldly existence itself becomes permeated with the light of Shabbat, one should read the Torah section that most generally expresses the essence of Shabbat, the section of the manna. For the manna, while retaining its essential greatness, descended even to the lowest levels. The same cannot be said of the Ten Commandments or other sections of the Torah. Although they are exceedingly lofty, they do not express as strongly this idea of descending into the lowest realm while remaining unchanged in their greatness.
The manna went into the kishkis of the worst person in the camp. It literally went into the intestines.
Kiss, what's that?
I'm translating the intestines.
Your test.
Yiddish.
I didn't know. I just wanted
We're
to
talking
clarify.
about this.
Yeah.
Was it today?
Yeah, about kishka. So we're talking about we're talking about the manna, which influences the person at his very core. You know, it's what you eat. It becomes a part of your bloodstream, right? And so that is something that has an influence on you. And just like Shabbat, it comes down and it has an influence on you. So we're dealing here with two exceptionally holy and elevated concepts which possess the same quality. Both descend and influence a person how he is within the reality of his everyday life.
The only
So-
thing that came from heaven that did not change its existence when it came here, or did not change its substance when it came here.
Well, yeah, it literally came down as a physical thing. Yeah. So that's why if you don't know which parsha to read on Shabbat, you read the parsha of the manna, because the manna and Shabbat possess the same distinct quality, the ability to descend into physical life and infuse it with holiness. Because you have food that's literally holy food, and you have a day that's a holy day. So now the Rebbe goes into the two types of spiritual bread, earthly Torah and heavenly Torah, Steve.
Oh, I'm there. Sorry about that. I just cut off the top. That was it.
All right.
Everything in the world has its source in the Torah. The two types of bread, bread from the earth and bread from heaven. The manna also exists within the Torah itself, but the Torah is called bread. These two spiritual forms of bread are the root source of the two physical forms of bread. These two forms of bread of the Torah are the revealed dimensions of Torah and the inner dimensions of Torah. The revealed dimension is called the bread from the earth, while the inner dimension is called bread from heaven. Just look at that. The revealed dimension of Torah is called bread from the earth because it involves questions, debates, and intellectual struggle, all of which require effort and exertion.
So that's like planting and sowing the.
Right.
Yeah.
The inner dimension of the Torah, by contrast, is called bread from heaven, for it contains no difficulties and no disputes.
Yeah. You don't have in the Zohar, this person says this and that person says that, and the other person asked, how come you said that if somebody else said that? You don't have that. It's just a free-flowing stream of divine consciousness. So that's similar to that's lechem min hashamayim. So Jewish mysticism is bread from heaven, just like the manna.
I was reading the other side that caught me. I've asked those best.
Okay. All right, Joe. The inner dimension of Torah belongs
to everyone. One should not think that because the inner dimension of Torah is called bread from heaven, it belongs only to a select spiritual elites. Just like the manna, the inner dimension of Torah belongs to every Jew, even to the wicked in the plain sense of the term. Not only can this study never cause harm, God forbid, just as the manna contain no waste and cause no harm. On the contrary, since study is great because it leads to action, the study of Hasidic teachings will ultimately lead people to return to God, study Torah, and observe the commandments. As the sages promise, the light within it restores a person to the good, referring to the inner light of Torah, the inner dimension of Torah. For this reason, one must never withhold the study of the inner dimension of Torah from any Jew. On the contrary, every effort should be made to bring every person closer to this bread from heaven, to the study of the inner teachings of Torah. Through this, they will arrive more quickly at the ultimate truth and become someone who does not lie. The falsehood of the material world, which conceals and denies divine truth, will be removed from within them. There will no longer be any inner conflict between the divine soul and the animal soul, no unresolved doubts or inner contradictions, and we will walk on the path of the King of the universe.
All right. So the bottom line is that we all have access to the bread from heaven. On a practical note, there's the Tanya is a very insightful book, especially nowadays. The Cycle of Tanya study talks about creation ex nihilo, how God created the world from nothing to something. And tomorrow actually begins chapter 7. If you want to understand what does it mean that God is one, God is our God, but God is one, that we say in the Shema. So tomorrow in Tanya, if you go to jewisharcadia.com/daily study, or you download the Chabad daily study app, and you can listen to Rabbi Josh, who teaches the daily Tanya. I would encourage you all to do that as a way to access the bread from heaven, which it's not a very deep analytical back and forth, how many measures of this and how many times that and this formula and that, but it's just inspiration that connects us closer to the bread from heaven. And if if bread from the earth sometimes makes us feel closer to the baker or to the bakery, and you might feel a certain loyalty to the person you bought the bread from because of all the work that they put into kneading and sifting and all that. When we eat the bread from heaven, so to speak, we certainly feel closer to God, the provider of that bread. So I want to encourage everyone to,
Very critical.
amen, to spend more time learning the inner dimensions of the Torah, just like the Leviathan, which he touched on it briefly. But we talked about the Leviathan represents the creatures of the earth, of the sea, and the Shorabor represents the creatures of the land. What's the world of the sea? The world of the sea, ironically, you don't see. It's all hidden, right? So it's the hidden world, which refers to the hidden dimension, the mystical dimension of Torah study. And then there's the creatures of the earth, which is the more open, in front of our nose, available knowledge that's more easily accessible and understood. But the truth of the matter is, the gift of this week's Torah portion, since we're supposed to live with the Torah portion, is that we receive bread from heaven. And that is the study of Hasidus, the study of the more mystical dimension of the Torah, which is bread from heaven. And that, just like Shabbos, will help us not lie. It'll help us overcome any conflict that there is between our good inclination and our negative inclination. So, yeah, let's learn more Chassidus.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line.